So right now, I'm really into the JOJOLands. I'm pretty excited about reading each chapter that comes out each month. So I know this is a little tardy to the party on this, considering we are now on chapter 25 of the JOJOLands. But I kind of wanted to start a series where every month, I just basically go over and review the chapter that comes out and just kind of talk about my own personal thoughts and opinions on the chapter. Like I said, I know tardy to the party, we're on chapter 25, but better late than never. So Jodio was featured on the front of this month's Ultra Jump cover, and again, it's just Jodio doing his pose that Araki is obsessed with for some reason. So back in 2024, Araki discusses his first public art piece, which is located at Osaka Station in Japan, and it's a illustration of the Fountain Boy drawn alongside some JoJo stands. And as you can see, it looks like this, and then the Fountain Boy is also doing that pose. I wanted to comment on this because I just think it's a little interesting and maybe the reason why we see Jodio at this pose so much. And then Araki comments on the pose and says, it's a pose that seems to be receiving rain or water, and that's how I ended up completing it. So if this is Araki's basically mindset around this pose, it makes sense where Jodio is doing this all the time because his stand November Rain literally makes it rain. And also, this part takes place in Hawaii, which rains a lot there. So, it makes sense. But yeah, Jodio looks great. I love the coloring. Araki's coloring is always awesome. I like the vegetation on the bottom here and how this looks. So I've actually been to Honolulu, Hawaii, and Waikiki, all places that are shown and talked about in this part so far. So I'm probably going to bring that up a couple times because I'm really I don't know, it's really exciting seeing seeing a JoJo part take place in a spot that you have, gone to. So this is chapter 25 titled La Cheblong's Investigation. So this starts off with PACO and Usagi arriving at Iki Iki Boutique, and immediately we can see Dark Determination PACO. This dude is pissed off, dude. He is very clearly not very happy with Aunt Merome's kidnapping, which is kind of cool because basically we can see that PACO does care about Aunt Merome, at least to some degree. I feel like the entire group basically looks up and respects Aunt Merome to some degree, which is a pretty cool thing in my opinion. So while PACO's brooding, we see Usagi who's crying in the car, and he says, I've never had any friends before, not one. And then he says, but Merome, she said I'm a good kid. If Merome leaves me, I don't know who to trust anymore. And he says, nobody has ever given two shits about me before her. And Usagi is just crying, and he's saying, it was only her. If Merome's gone, then I have nobody. And we have this kind of cool moment that I wasn't expecting where PACO basically steps in and comforts Usagi. He says, you don't have to let this get to you. You have nothing to be ashamed about here. He says, our relationship is purely about making money. And the same goes for Jodio, Dragana, and Charming Man. This relationship we have here is all about whether we gain or lose money. And he says, so if you're feeling like this is too intense for you, then just go ahead and quit. He says, you can bow out and there's no shame in that. There are 2 police officers in Merome's boutique, and if we go in there now, you're going to be in for a rough time. As in for your whole future, your adolescence, your whole life from here on out is going to pay a price if you go in there. Either way, I know you'll have good friends one day. And he puts his hand around Usagi's shoulder and says, don't sweat it, okay? Even if you bow out now, I'll make sure you get a share of Howler's assets. It won't be the full amount your share originally was going to be though, of course. So this is kind of a really cool moment because the entire group up until this point has basically just bullied Usagi and not really taken him seriously. So PACO basically stepping in here and comforting Usagi in this situation is kind of cool and unexpected. Usagi then reveals he has something in his hand and he says, I didn't mean it like that. That's not what I was saying, PACO. I meant that if we hurry, we could still stick them back on. But I don't know if it could already be too late. And he reveals he has a cup of ice with Aunt Merle's fingers in it. He says, we've got to hurry. I was thinking about how such an awful thing happened to Aunt Merome. I've got ice from the school vending machine and I put it in this cup. If we hurry, we can reattach the severed tissue. The nerves will reattach too. And PACO just kind of stands there and looks at Usagi and he says, you brought them the 3 fingers? So you are going in too then, inside the shop? And Usagi says, yes, those sacks of shit, yeah, I'm coming in. I will kill them myself. And PACO just looks at Usagi and says, okay, Alright then, we're going in through the boutique's rear entrance, and remember, Lulu-chan and Yakaoma are still in the hidden room. And he says, open that dashboard. And Usagi opens the dashboard of the car, and it reveals a fucking revolver in the dashboard. Usagi and PACO approach the back door of Iki Iki, and PACO says only use that for saving Meryl May. I'll let you hold on to it. So this cuts to Lasha Blanc, Aunt Meryl May, and Ningbo inside of the boutique, and for some reason Ningbo has what appears to be, I think, an SMG fucking 11 with a silencer on it? I don't know why he has that, or how he got that, but sure. Lasha Blanc states, what a lovely boutique we have here. You ever hear that saying that if you open on the main street of Waikiki, no matter what kind of shop it is, business is guaranteed to boom? And honestly, what Lasha Blanc is saying here is completely right. It's pretty cool because, again, I've actually been to Waikiki Beach. I've been to Waikiki Beach. That place is just, the amount of people there is just fucking insane. I could open a fucking dirt shop. I sell exotic dirt. Zayden's exotic dirt shop. And I would probably be, like, make fucking bank off of that because of just how many people are at Waikiki. And then we see Aunt Meryl May, who is handcuffed, and she has a towel wrapped around her hand because her fingers got blown off by Ningbo. And she's obviously not doing too hot, as someone who has their fingers blown off probably would. So Ningbo and Lasha Blanc approach this door that has a keypad on it. And then Ningbo approaches the door and touches the doorknob and activates his stand, which we still don't have a name of yet. And he basically inflates the doorknob like a balloon until it pops, which allows them to gain access to this door. So the three of them enter the room and they basically just kind of look around, and it just looks like a normal boutique, I'm assuming. And then Lasha Blanc says, no one here? And Lasha Blanc says, Principal Meryl May, want to see it again? And then she shows Principal Meryl May the phone, and it was a recording of back when they approached her at the school, and it's basically just Lasha Blanc saying that she's going to ask Meryl May questions, and then she can just answer via yes or no. So Lasha Blanc shows Meryl May a picture of PACO and says, PACO has comrades. When we checked the hospital cameras, we couldn't get any clear images for some reason, but we know he was a part of a group of 5. We want to know their identities, each of them. And there's one more thing which we think is connected. There's a girl called Lulu-chan that's gone missing, and we're looking for her. And then she says, you're the one that's giving these groups orders, yes? Principal Meryl May? So Aunt Meryl May being confronted with these questions, she doesn't say anything. She just stands there. But you can see she's visually getting stressed out over the situation. Then we can see Lasha Blanc's nematodes, which again, I don't think is actually her stand. I'm pretty sure she has a stand separate from this. I think this is just some random ability that Lasha Blanc has. It might be her stand, but I just have a feeling this is just some ability she has. And if I remember correctly, Lasha Blanc's nematodes can sense stress in a person. I could be wrong. I could be misremembering that. But basically, she can ask a question, and the nematodes can basically sense distress in somebody when somebody's lying. So they form on her glasses when they sense stress. And they basically point to the location of someone stressing out. I don't exactly remember. But basically, Lasha Blanc can ask a question, and if somebody is lying, the nematodes will point to the person who's lying as being stressed out or whatever. It's basically a way of her knowing if someone's lying or not. So the nematodes start forming on Lasha Blanc's glasses and starts pointing at Aunt Meryl May, which reveals that Aunt Meryl May is the one giving orders to the group. And then Lasha Blanc says, there's a liar here. She says, you really should answer, you know. And she says, that or here, would you like a towel? And Ningbo, who is recording, steps in and touches Aunt Meryl May's hand, which immediately blows off like 3 of her fingers, and it pops her fingers off her hand like a balloon. This is obviously pretty intense, and she's literally watching her hand get basically blown up. And then she says, that's right. And then Lasha Blanc gets in Meryl May's face and says, it's odd, I must say, Principal Meryl May. We came here to this eco place because you told us this was your hideout back at the school's principal's office. But now that we're here, we don't see anybody. Where is PACO? She says, I'm asking a question. I'm now asking about where PACO's whereabouts is. Where is he? And we see that the nematodes on Lasha Blanc's glasses, they fade away, basically revealing that Admiral May doesn't know where PACO is, and that's the truth. La LeBlanc says, the nematodes are drawing back. You're not lying. So despite not knowing where PACO's location is, you told us that this was your hideout before. So PACO isn't here, but then what exactly is going on here? She goes over to Ningbo and says, Ningbo, what's going on behind that panel? And he replies that it's just a warehouse space where there's just some boxes and coat hangers and stuff. So the three of them enter this backroom space where it's just like boxes and other backroom items. And then La LeBlanc says, I'm willing to bet on it. There's a hidden door concealing a secret room. She goes, Principal Merrill-May, why exactly would someone like you have one of those made? And just what has your team done to Howler? She moves on to her next question and says, how many people are in this hidden room right now? Is it one? And then she makes a one gesture with her hand, but the second she moves her hand to a gesture of a two, the nematodes form on her glasses again. And she goes, oh, that's right. So it's two, huh? And then she says, in that case, Principal, I understand how you feel, but calm down. I'm going to be pointing my finger now. When I point to the location of the hidden door, you just nod. No struggling or yelling. Got it? And basically, La LeBlanc starts pointing around the room, and she can find out where the hidden door is when the nematodes start forming on her glasses. So she points down, and immediately the nematodes on her glasses start forming again, which reveals there is a hidden door on the ground. And she says, oh, that side is it. So it's below us. So Nemo gets down and pulls up a carpet, reveals a hidden door on the ground. La LeBlanc gets down and immediately says, I'm opening it. But before she opens it, Admiral May steps in and says, you two, did you come here already knowing about the money? About how our target is $50 billion? Howler has over $50 billion in assets. And we have a means of getting all of them. And we will. That's a certainty. That's why we're doing this. Admiral May revealing this to La LeBlanc and Ningbo leaves both of them stunned. And we can see the nematodes on La LeBlanc's glasses fading away. $50 billion. That's the truth. Didn't you hear that from Howler? Now, I don't know how much you're getting paid from Howler for going on this mission for him, but if you open that door, then you'll see what's in the basement room. And if you report about it to Howler on your phone, then that $50 billion will alter to zero. Understand? Zero. It'll mean that two of you will become zero. Don't report this to Howler. La LeBlanc hearing this is stunned and says, 50 billion? Ningbo, however, is convinced that it's a bluff, and he says, don't trust her. But Admiral May says, don't open the door. There's also the idea of shares to consider. But La LeBlanc opens it anyway, which reveals a secret room where we can see Lulu-chan just chilling on like a bed with like a bunch of potato chips and stuff. Just a place where she's been hiding out, I guess. La LeBlanc says, you're kidding me. I find it funny here that Lulu-chan just has a gun being pointed at her, and she can very clearly see there's some sort of bad situation happening, and she kind of just doesn't give a fuck. And we can also see the bank guy in the back who's basically on life support. La LeBlanc says, it's the girl, it's the missing Lulu-chan. What on earth? I never thought she'd be here. And there's another person on the bed back there. So there's someone injured. Who is he? And she goes, oh, I know that face. That's the division chief from Dolphin Bank. That's the one who's always doing business with Howler. And in the middle right when they discover this, Ningbo just swings around behind him and just starts spraying the back door. And he immediately goes, PACO, at the door. There's another one too. The last panel we see is PACO already on the ceiling, clinging to the ceiling with his stand, the hustle, and he's grabbing onto Ningbo's helmet. And the text on the bottom says, the starting bell rings. PACO versus Ningbo. Again, just another awesome chapter. This I can see starting to get pretty messy. We have PACO, Usagi, Admiral May, maybe even possibly Lulu-chan, I don't know, versus La LeBlanc, who we don't know of her stand ability yet, if it's the nematode thing or there's something else. And then we also have Ningbo, which his stand ability can just inflate things like a balloon, which there's a lot of moving parts with this one thing happening alone. I could see this getting messy. Usagi has a gun, La LeBlanc has a gun, and then Ningbo has a SMG. So I don't know where this is even gonna go, but I could just see this being messy. Also, I don't know if Lulu Chan's gonna play a part in this, if she even really cares, honestly, because she works for Howler. She's a part of Howler. So I don't know how Lulu Chan, if she does, how she will play a role in this. I can see next chapter, however, and next month, cutting back to Jodio and Jorgana and Charming Man back on the yacht with Howler. But yeah, this is getting pretty intense. Also, we haven't seen Aunt Meryl's May stand yet. And I have a feeling, just because Aunt Meryl May is like a respected authority figure to this group, I feel like she's going to have some busted stand. That could be me. She's definitely a stand user, but I guarantee you she's going to have something like just busted. So this chapter is definitely setting up a pretty crazy fight. I'm pretty excited to see that happening. My favorite part of the chapter, however, is probably the very beginning where we see Dark Determination PACO, which, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm pretty sure this is the first time we've seen a non-Joestar have the Dark Determination thing. So that's pretty cool. But my main favorite thing, though, is seeing PACO basically comfort Usagi, who's obviously just going through it, because Usagi basically reveals to PACO that Aunt Meryl May is the only person who has ever basically cared for him, which kind of goes into Usagi's character a little bit, and we can understand probably why Usagi's even working for Aunt Meryl May. Now, I don't know with the things that Usagi was saying, if it deconfirms the fact that if it deconfirms, I don't know exactly if what Usagi was saying deconfirms the fan theory that Usagi might be Aunt Meryl May's son. But the way he was talking about Aunt Meryl May doesn't seem like that's his mom. It kind of seemed that way, though, considering how Aunt Meryl May threw Usagi into the group just, like, at a whim at the very end of Chapter 1. But, seeing PACO, who has traditionally just bullied Usagi or hasn't give a fuck about him, all of a sudden kind of step in and comfort him, is kind of cool. Also, I think Usagi's definitely my favorite character. I'm I'm really excited to see how this fight is going to go and how we're going to see possibly Aunt Meryl May stand and possibly Aunt Meryl May stand, possibly Lasha Blanc stand if it's not the nematode thing, and then how Usagi and PACO are basically going to have to fight against these two opponents. But yeah, I just wanted to talk about this. I love JoJoLands. I figured I could make a series just talking about it because I like it. I love it. That's what YouTube's about. It's talking about things you like, right? So I think I'm going to start doing this moving forward. I don't know if people will like it. I'm going to do it anyways. But yeah, tell me what your thoughts were on the chapter, what y'all think. I'm going to go. Bye!